All right, welcome back to another episode of Pomelo Pitch Deck, where we dive in with some of the proposal writers about their projects that they're looking for Pomelo funding or Pomelo grants to, jumpstart the EOS ecosystem, their projects, EOS.io, everything that's kind of involved with that. So no strangers to the space today. We have Chris Barnes on the line, who's here to talk about two individual proposals. One is EnergEOS. That's a little bit difficult to say, especially here at the EnergEOS team. Anyway, EnergEOS.
Right.
And the second one, which I totally blanked on the name. Sorry.
Antifragile Education.
Right, antifragile. So one of them, I think, is involved with governance in Eden, and the other one is involved with sustainable energy, right?
Basically, yeah. And you're right. I totally confuse EnergEOS with EnergEOS all the time when I'm explaining this to people sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah, it's totally tough. So so your background, I'm not sure if people know this, but this is a little bit important. Maybe your background was actually working in the power industry in a way, right?
Yeah. That's the job that I had prior to that first Eden election that I was unfortunately let go from. Well, not unfortunately. It turns out, when you get these unexpected life changes, it's terrible at first. It's like the floor drops out from under you, and it's turned out to be maybe one of the best things that's ever happened. So I should be quite grateful, and I am in fact quite grateful. But I was a director of solar operations for a bunch of it was a Canadian renewable power company that had hydro, wind, and solar plants, and I was in charge of a fleet of solar industrial size, hundreds of acres of solar facilities, basically. So yeah, I've got a pretty good experience on how to run plants, but also just getting them built, and seen the budgets of many proposals of plants in early greenfield stage, all the way through to acquisition after they've been around and running for a bunch of years. So yeah, that's where I came from. And that's where EnergEOS happened, kind of in terms of my involvement. Ray Schilling, who has been around in the EOS community for a long time, had EnergEOS and looking for ways to incorporate just renewable plants, whether it's just the tracking of the electrons and doing monitoring and metering of solar plants using blockchain. So EOS was the most performant one. He was first dabbling in Ethereum. And then when EOS came along, it's like, oh, well, this will actually do what we need. We need these half-a-second blocks and to be able to do this high-performance stuff to keep track with electron flow, which is very quick. So yeah, when I met Ray, our backgrounds really aligned. He loves solar. I love solar. I mean, I think renewable power is amazing. And so then we so what EnergEOS is looking to do, and the Pomelo pitch is, we want to tokenize physical renewable assets. So in this case, starting with solar, not unlike what Shintai is doing with commercial real estate. And it's tokenizing the physical assets so that anybody like you and me who normally could never own a piece of an actual large scale solar facility, you can now own a piece of it. So that's the problem we're trying to solve.
This is interesting to me because we're both Canadian, and I remember back in the early days, this is a long time ago, a couple decades ago almost, of solar in Canada. I remember there being I don't know whether these were wives' tales or whether these were actual things, but I remember there being people who were saying that they were actually able to sell excess solar energy back to the grid. And I don't know that happened in very many other countries, and I think that they kind of discontinued that after a while because they were kind of going broke. But this is kind of the next level up to that, whereby you can actually profit in the profitability of a company that's doing good for the world, right? I like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the thing in Canada, it was Ontario. It was the province of Ontario. And it was a very, very unique thing that they were subsidizing. They were subsidizing solar plants to get built, smaller ones, 10 megawatt solar plants. But they were paying 4-ish times the rate of what we as a consumer would pay for our power. The generator was getting 4 times that rate. So it was a subsidy from the government. So it was well-intentioned. It was domestic content was a part of that. So any of those projects had to have a certain percentage of domestic content. So the panels had to be made here. The piles, where these are mostly fixed rack at that time. This is 2010 or so. So now a lot of them will have racks that will actually move and track the sun, and a single axis tracker is very common. But these were all fixed rack, and they were subsidized, and it had local labor, it was good for jobs, and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, there was a reason why this happened, but the program is called a FIT program, and it got feed-in tariff is what it was called. And there was some farmers who were getting closer to like 7 to 8 times the traditional rate pair for really small. Like you could put up a 10 kilowatt site on your property, and a lot of farmers did this, and and it's 25-year power purchase agreement. So they get that rate for, like, they're just making a mint.
Right.
That's good for them. I mean, it's what it is.
But I just, total aside on that one. But I like it
total
because
aside.
It's like you know, the idea of being able to. I'm not sure if I'm choosing the right words here, but the idea to be able to democratize like things like power, or things like trade, or things like education. I think all of these things are very important, because we live in this society that is a democracy, and then we vote on people who make unanimous decisions however they feel like voting.
Sure.
So right.
Yeah,
there's kind of like a really big disconnect. So why don't let's start with
democracy in name only,
right? Yeah, right. Let's start with the EnergEOS.
Yeah.
So how exactly are you guys gonna? I'll pull it up too. How exactly are you guys gonna utilize the funds? And what are you gonna build? And how is it gonna benefit the EOS ecosystem, or the EOSIO ecosystem? I guess.
Yep. The project isn't it. It's not the greatest public good per se. Like, this is a tricky one. We actually got declined on our first submission because what this will do, the output of this, is that any individual who wants to buy a piece of a solar facility. So we have to onboard actual asset owners. So like my previous employer, in fact, would be a good one. Like current asset owners they'll tokenize a portion of these facilities, and then any person like us can go and buy it. But in order for us to do that, to interact with this exchange, we need to have an EOS account. So what this is going to do is it's going to force anyone in the world who wants to own a piece of a solar facility and diversify some of their assets into these long-term revenue generating assets, essentially, which they are. They're very profitable. You're going to need an EOS account. So this is kind of why it's good for EOS. Even though it's just one thing and one reason to have an EOS account, it gets people into the ecosystem. So that's good for EOS. What it will lead to, and this is where it was like, arguably, we were just looking to raise funds just to build this, basically. But you need to, like, in order to buy, you'll need to KYC. There's going to be some, it's not just a free flowing DeFi thing. Like, you'll have to, in order to these institutions to actually put up their assets, the owners have to go through a bit of KYC AML. Like, that's just going to be part of it. But that's not, like, we're going to leverage a back end that already exists. We're just creating this kind of white labeled front end to allow this exchange to take place. And so what it will do is current asset owners are going to be able to deleverage. There's a lot of debt associated with these projects. So they can retire debt, or if they don't have much debt, they can recapitalize. So they can raise capital to then hopefully build more projects. So part of the idea is this is going to allow for a huge influx of capital into the renewable power industry to have these current owners get capital in and build more plants. So more solar facilities should hopefully get built from this type of service and product. Problem is it's a should, right? We can't guarantee they're going to.
And obviously the draw for the solar industry or the investor is that, generally speaking, if you want to be an investor in these types of products, you have to be accredited, you have to put up a certain amount of money, right? Like there's no simple like fractionalization, things like that. No. So that's obvious, but why EOS then, right? Like we've seen other energy products that are looking at these types of things on other blockchains. Why would you choose EOS over another blockchain? I'm not saying you shouldn't choose EOS. I just want people to understand the benefits of utilizing EOS for something like this.
Well, it's just so much faster, and the account permissions, and there is a back-end provider like Shintai who already are working on all the regulatory compliant bits that allow. So that means we're looking at different backends. Shintai is one of them, but there's a couple others. And so ideally, and we love EOS, we know how good it is. We know it's been sort of underrepresented in the global ecosystem of sorts. And the account permissions also work really well, where you use your Anchor wallet, you sign in, you get into our website. So what this pitch is for is to generate the funds to make this front end, where then anybody could potentially use our open source front end code to then tokenize another asset of their choice and tie it in with an existing backend. So we're just kind of create this funnel that could be used by other applications for tokenizing of other assets. And that's sort of that's the public good that we've nailed in on, is we're trying to raise funds just to build this front end piece. But then, yeah, it's EOS because it just makes sense. It ties into the back end nicely. The account permission systems are good, and it's fast. And we can have a front page that you can see in real time, your little meter spinning as the sun's shining and generating electrons. You can see yourself slowly making money, and we can do that in real time because EOS is that fast. If we use something like Ethereum, it's just too slow, right? I mean, yeah.
Well, the transaction fees are going to cut into your profit.
And transaction fees, that's right. And here, yeah, you can. There's basically no fees involved. So yeah, EOS is the obvious choice to build this on, and so yeah, and ideally, what happens? And the idea, you can't right now, Jimmy, you can't go buy a piece of an actual solar facility. The best you could do is buy shares in a publicly traded company that happens to have solar facilities, but they have other stuff too. You're physically buying the asset. And this is where I come in. So this is the piece I bring, is in order to, like, if you're going to spend money on an asset and then look to generate revenue, one of the predictors of success is how well that asset is maintained. So this is where I come in, because I'm going to build a team, hopefully, that then vets projects as they come into the EnergEOS system to make sure they're being well maintained. I want to see their documents, and because this is what I did. I ran these things, right? So I know how these things are maintained, and I know how corners are cut and they're not maintained. So our job is going to be to kind of add confidence to the token purchaser that this thing is going to keep generating for the next 10 years, because that's the thing. The lifetime of these plants to generate money, if you got in, if an asset gets tokenized right away, like when it's first built, there could be a 30-year lifespan on that. So that's 30 years of revenue coming from the tokens, and those tokens are going to be liquid. You're going to be trading them to other people on that platform who also KYC AML, and you can trade those tokens across. And as these tokens age, as the assets age, the lifespan of the token also shortens, because it's going to sort of end at the end of the PPA, or power purchase agreement, for the physical site. Then there's going to be like this interesting arbitrage and valuation of these tokens, and they're going to change in value over time because there's less value that can be extracted in terms of the revenue. So there's going to be a very interesting dynamic that'll happen with these tokens that we don't even really see, we won't see with commercial real estate, because it's not the same. So it's quite exciting from that respect.
It's interesting that you can parallel the goddess of the dawn with the power of the sun.
Right? Well, yeah. And this is something, we're just starting with solar. This will work for any renewable generation facility. It would work with hydro, which is super long duration periods of time. It'll work with wind. It'll even work with storage assets and things like that, right? So we're looking to go very green. Like that's a focus that's important to us. I mean, you could technically do it with oil and gas if you really felt like it, but our focus for now is green assets. And and so we need to make sure they run well, and that's where I come in. And if this goes as planned, this is a really big deal. Like there's trillions of dollars that are flowing towards renewable generation and getting these projects built. We know this is part of kind of these globalist initiatives, like them or hate them. That one, not so bad. I mean, in my view.
Yeah, I like it. Like there's been a few projects that have come out, like Energy Web Token and a bunch of things that have happened over the last 4 or 5 years on Ethereum as well. But like, it seems to me like what really differentiates this one is this is almost like a plug and play option for already existing infrastructure projects, which not a lot of them have. Like a lot of them are raising capital to be able to, create a new, a new infrastructure. Whereas by you want to plug into infrastructures that are already there. And I think like once people realize that they could actually, buy shares in something like this and cover their own energy costs and then make a profit, like that's pretty amazing too.
What you do with your revenue, to purchase a share, like if one of these facilities is next door to you, you could purchase a share in that if you want, but it doesn't matter. I mean, this is where you get a global exposure now.
No, that didn't mean like you had to like pay for the same place you bought it from, right? Like you're going to get those.
That was one of the ideas, though. One of the ideas is we could tokenize, and even you go to a local community solar and you say, hey, why don't you tokenize that? And your local community can actually buy a piece of the solar that's feeding their community right next door. I mean, that's part of it, but it's you don't need to be exclusionary. You just open it up, and they can, but so can anybody else.
Maybe I'll tokenize my own solar panel.
Wait, for this revenue to be there, why not?
Right?
Yeah, I
No,
mean,
I like
these
it.
plants make a lot of money. So I've looked at the models. I mean, I have models. Like again, it's what I did. So I know how the economics of these plants work. And the IRR for a token holder it depends on how the power purchase agreement, they're not all the same, but it can basically be from 7 to 15% APR. Sorry. So your annual return can be 7 to 15-ish%. And then EnergEOS will take a small like service fee and management fee. So this can make a lot of money for EnergEOS if we really scale to a lot of projects, and it makes a lot of money for the token holder who wants to buy these assets. I mean, yeah, the original asset owner is going to lose that revenue, but a lot of them are carrying a ton of debt. And there's a lot of uncertainty. They don't know where rates are going to go. They have to refinance these original asset owners every 5 or so years. They're refinancing. That can cost $1 million. So, I mean, there's a lot of win-wins here that can come from that project.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I like it. I'm a fan. I think it's a cool idea. So, next, let's dive into anti-fragile education, fractal government, holacracy, and EOS. So this one is a little bit different. This is more about the education aspect rather than the actual technical aspect. So why don't you go into that one? What is this one, and why is this one important?
Yeah, well, it's a working group that came out of Eden, and a few of us were looking like we have Dan's book, like in terms of this idea of what is Eden, right? Eden is just a process to select leaders and representatives. And so that process came from Dan's book, More Equal Animals. And so the idea is we want to get this idea of you can pick your leaders in a different way, right? Democracy doesn't need to be the way we think democracy is. Picking your student representative in your classroom doesn't need to be just the popular people put up their hands as running and everyone just votes for them. That's a democracy in name only, dino, as Dan calls it in his book. And so fractal democracy is a new way to pick leaders. And so we want to teach kids and even like high school, so young adults and homeschooling, we want to create curriculum that can teach some of these ideas, that there's different ways to do things. And so fractal democracy, that's one thing. We want to teach a different way to do democracy. Holacracy is a different way to organize companies. It's a different way to kind of break down traditional hierarchies that we often see in organizations and replace them with something that's very flat. And it's open. It allows for equal opportunity. It's still functional. You can still get a lot done and not have a dictatorial hierarchy running the show, right? So we want to teach that. There's another way you can organize people into groups and still be successful and still achieve goals. And then EOS, the title, there's not enough room. So really we want to teach blockchain. So we want to teach blockchain. We want to create curriculum for young kids, grades 3 to 8, 9 to 12. There's not a lot out there for them. And we want to make kind of this accessible, and it teaches the ideas of blockchain, starts with what it is, talks about, then maybe we teach about Bitcoin. Then why does EOS, why did that come into existence? There's a lot of legitimate reasons why Bitcoin couldn't do everything. Like EnergEOS couldn't happen on Bitcoin, or Ethereum for that matter. So we want to teach that, and we want to make this sort of really accessible in an open platform that anyone can take, and it's teachers' materials. So if you're a teacher, we're trying to fit this so it's something you could bring and actually fit into your existing curriculum. So we're trying to tie it into social studies and computer science and social science, in fact. And so these existing kind of topics, we're going to have modules for you and teach the teachers materials. So it's not just PowerPoints that a teacher could show. It's like, we're going to educate the teacher. Here's what you need to know. Here's how you present this. Here's the game. We're going to have like manipulatives for young kids, and you can little bags of jubes, and you can trade them across and show like transactions and make like actual blocks of wood where you could write things on it and create a blockchain of information and try to like get these ideas into kids' heads. That's sort of the whole purpose here. And this is a true public good, because any money we raise is just going to be used to basically polish and professionalize. We have a kids book it's basically done. It's for a grade 5 kids book where the kids they need to pick a student council or student representative from their class. And the one kid, Daniel, has a great idea because his dad was reading a book called More Equal Animals. Why don't we break everyone into small groups and we talk amongst our group, and they do the fractal democracy process that we're doing. So we're going to get an illustrator to really make this an actual proper, nice children's book for grade 5 and up. And it's pretty exciting. Like this is, to me, is an underappreciated pitch on Pomelo. I think it's not, it's not that sexy, but in terms of like a true public good, teaching young children about a new way to do democracy, which we can all agree is probably useful, and then a new way to do organizations because hierarchies aren't ideal, and then about blockchain. It's a pretty cool initiative.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but my background was actually, my postgraduate was actually in education.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, like good luck with this because like it's definitely lacking. I actually wrote a whole book on for my thesis on a better way to educate people, which is kind of interesting because like mine was more like go out there in the world and actually do things rather than just sitting in a classroom and reading books. Like for example, I wanted to have students like grow food in the garden and then like create a recipe book and then create like lunch boxes that they could go out into the town and they could create a marketing plan in their economics class and sell these lunch boxes to like the construction workers who are building the monorail in the town and things like this. And basically what it came down to was we weren't allowed to do that because any funding that comes into the school has to come in from the Board of Education in the district that I was in. So I was like, this is kind of crazy. This is ridiculous. But I will side this with this. One of the original ideas that we had back in the day with Uplift Nation, which it kind of, was the precursor to all of the other things that are happening now over in the other sector of work that I do. And we wanted to create this community center. And in this community center in the middle of Haiti, we were going to do very similar things like this, teach children, cool. Because once children learn this, they're going to go home and they're going to teach their parents, right? And so like children can learn like how to manage money, how to, understand how a blockchain works, which like they're probably going to need to learn how to do sooner or later anyway, because like the gaming industry on blockchain is going to take the world by storm.
Yep.
Right.
That's right.
So like, and I think like just beyond teaching them the benefits of using blockchain, I think you need to teach them the risks, because like what happens when they're not learning those risks? What happens when they go home? And they log into some game and they mess up and like, they're using their parents' wallet that just happens to have, I don't know, a token or shares from an energy company, an undisclosed named energy company. And all of a sudden, all those shares are gone, right? So I think this education thing, like you're right, it's really underrated. There's a lot of adults who don't understand it. I mean, we see it all the time. We see people coming in, with DeFi and saying, when price go up, but you guys took all my money. And it's like, no, like impermanent risk, read it 101, right? Like, and so if we can get to them, it's going to sound really bad, but if we can get to them young, right? Like we can manipulate their minds in the right way.
Well, it's ideas.
Really
we're just trying to spread ideas. Like an idea is something, ideas aren't zero sum games. Like if a new idea can change your world. And I think we've all maybe had inspiration in our youth of something that just, it's ideas and we get inspired and that can change our whole trajectory of our life. And so we want to give a chance for that for kids. And so one of the gentlemen involved with this, his name is Dennis, and he's a high school teacher. He's just like late in his career, and he's now writing a whole new curriculum about teaching what is money, the differences between how does interest work, compound interest, how to value traditional equities and bonds, and like how to traditional markets. But then how about crypto? And he's tying in crypto. How do you evaluate crypto? What is a good crypto? What is scarcity? What are all these properties of money, fungibility, durability, divisibility, portability, all that stuff, right? I never learned that. I've learned it since because I've become interested in Bitcoin, and you learn this stuff because it seems like a prereq to understand Bitcoin. So he's making this whole platform, and part of it's going to be also bringing in what is fractal democracy. Like he's going to teach that in a senior high school student financial literacy course, basically. But he's going to try to tease in all these ideas, and he's creating content. He's creating material that other high school teachers can now use. So like the idea is just to make this database, this website will end up standing up, and it'll have, that's the example curriculum there. And play to earn dApps, right? Tokenomics, NFTs. How many high school kids would love to be able to learn about that stuff? I mean, it's right. So we're trying to do it in a structured way that teaches the risks, because there are risks, and buyer beware. And, you know, these kids are like, he mentioned, right? They see this Shiba coin and they're like, oh, price go up. I should buy some. It's like, wait, what are you buying? Do you understand how these work? And do you understand? So he's trying to teach, not to like, you know, provide financial guidance to these kids. It's just to give them the background so they can make smart choices.
Well, I mean, and honestly, we should be teaching them, you know, how to understand finance in general, right? Like, we don't who was the last kid you ever met that learned how to do their own taxes, right? Right?
Well,
this should be like, no, but I mean, like, this should be like foundation of
it should
be. Know, when do we ever get taught really about like deep investing and understanding beyond like, you know, basically, you know, the surface area of the economics, right? Like we're still under this. I used to teach economics, and part of the reason I left was because like it doesn't make sense. Everything that they're teaching you doesn't make sense, right? And so with maybe part of the reason that I found blockchain and I liked it was because that actually makes sense. You know,
sure,
it makes a lot more sense than some of these, you know, draconian concepts.
You're saying negative interest rates doesn't make any sense, Jimmy?
Yeah, that's like, I mean,
it's like defies the laws of financial physics, right? Like it should not be possible to have negative interest rates.
Yeah, and I mean, like I live in a country that, like, on paper has like one of the worst balance sheets, right? Like, but they're still right, but they are still like the go-to country whenever there's financial crisis anywhere in
nuts.
the world, right?
I know. It's irrational. So we're trying to teach these kids to have a rational view of how this all works, and then they can make their own decisions. So it's really good. We got a great group of people who are dedicated to this, and they've been, you know, we're just volunteering. And then so the money we raise from this is just to pay for professionals who do some animation and to do illustration and to help like polish up PowerPoints, and then we just make it available and free to everyone. Like that's, and maybe we could do some print books, and could be a monetizable kind of project out of this. But generally speaking, this is meant to be an absolute public good and free for everyone to have access to the material.
I mean, if you spend 25% of the funds on getting the Board of Education in every district to adopt it, then you'll be rolling in money, because like they throw money at everything that doesn't make any sense. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where this is,
we just got a contract for $100 million to sell a children's book to grade 5.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully this is like a grassroots thing, right? We're hoping this is just teachers, people who are interested, learn about this, and they find the website, and it's not tied to Eden. Like we're not going to even Eden, like we don't even necessarily want to call it. That's why it's anti-fragile education, because it's an idea. An idea is an idea. And yes, it will give credit to where it came from, which is Dan in his book. But generally speaking, this is just its own thing, and it can live and teach people and inspire the young minds of our youth today. And hopefully they take these ideas, and next time when they're a little older and they actually have to do an election for something, they start to question, well, how did those representatives get picked, and why is it just those two choices? Why? I mean, that I like this other way better that I learned in grade 5, right? That's what we want.
Well, so. And like 1/12. That's essentially what's dedicated to Eden on there, right? Like everything else is, you know, things that they're probably going to encounter, right? Play to earns, definitely they're going to encounter. NFTs they're going to encounter, right? Like contracts they're going to encounter. I mean, obviously Bitcoin, they probably already know about it. You know, one of my favorite guests I always have on the show is, you know, Miss Teen Crypto, because like she's speaking to a whole generation that's growing up with this stuff, and some of them might know it better than their parents, and like you said, like it can be a great resource for classrooms and education, but it can also be a great resource for communities or other groupings. Or
that's right.
So.
One of the things, the outputs is actually, if you wanted to have a fractal, say you wanted to encourage your mayor in your local community to be chosen via this method, the fractal democratic method, we're trying to also create material that you can take to the council meeting and say, here, this is how this works. We should try this. This might be better. And so it's not, the education spans the scope, and it's, say you have a legion and you want to pick, and we want to create documentation. You could stand in front of your legion and say, here's how we can do it. Here's a deck of cards. Low-tech way to do a fractal democratic election. Doesn't have to be on EOS, doesn't have to be high-tech. There's a lot of material that we can make out of this. I mean, It's kind of endless in a way.
Did you almost just say democracy?
I did probably would have mixed up
I like
something.
that. I like that. That's good. Hey, we're not trying to create a democracy. We're trying to create a democracy.
Democracy.
Right. I mean, fair enough. I mean, there are, Bitcoin cities popping up. There are all these places popping up. But, what did they say? A home or a city is a state of mind. And with the internet, with things like Eden, with things like Pomelo, we're actually able to, associate with like-minded people for the most part. It's great. Like Pomelo is awesome because like the fudders don't really bother us because like it's not right. It's kind of right. It's kind of good, and they have no idea what's going on and what's coming from like the amount of funding that's coming into the EOS ecosystem. Nobody's paying attention to it. It's going to be nuts, right?
And I remember back before Eden was funded from the ENF, there was a discussion of like, what are you going to do with it? Like, why does Eden need these funds? And it was a fair question because we didn't really have like, what projects are there out there in our ecosystem? Like, we know we have this capacity to build great things on EOS. Now Pomelo pops up and there's like 70 projects. So I mean, there's no shortage of projects that could use some funding within EOS. So
and the best part is like many of them already have started or have a starting point, right? Like even this last one that you talked about, right? Like you guys have already got a book. It's already written. It's already done. All you need to do is like illustrate it, put it out there on the market, right? Like looking at like a lot of projects that have already, done things in the ecosystem, and the funding is just kind of a way to like tap them along to a place where it actually works and it actually makes a massive impact as opposed to just struggling day by day trying to bootstrap this stuff from your own pocketbook basically. So
the EOS ecosystem is definitely going to have a resurgence here. I think people, I mean, the price doesn't indicate this, but that's okay. The price is often not dictated by rationality.
I mean, the wax price was super low until it wasn't, right? Like the price of Bitcoin was like, $3,000, like, I don't know, not a year ago, but like, a year and a half ago, like $3,000, right? Like, and now we're up over 60, right? Like the price of Ethereum was like, I remember it was like $15 or something, right? And like, so I think like anyone who says, "Oh, EOS is dead," I mean, well, it's around $5. Like, it's not dead. Anything that's around $5, right?
And it's one of the only two. It's the only 3 cryptos are approved by the SEC as not being. I mean, so I don't know. I'm not counting that chicken yet. I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited and still engaged in the EOS ecosystem.
I don't think any of us are, to be honest, and that's what's great is like this last 2 or 3 years is weeded out all the people. Nobody's paying attention to Pomelo, and nobody's really paying attention to what the EOS Network Foundation is doing. Nobody's paying attention to Helios. Nobody's paying attention to Eden on EOS, or even some of the proposals like EOS Starter. There's so much funding in this space right now. It's crazy, So I'm excited. I'm excited for the space. I'm excited to see how these projects that you're working on, Chris, play out. I'm excited to see what you and all the other projects do with the funds, because like when this first season finishes up and rolls out, we're like, I think we're going to be blown away because there's going to be updates coming from everywhere, right? Like this isn't a winner takes all sort of funding mechanism, right? Like whatever you get, right? And you've already received some of the funds for those initial donations, right? And now with the matching that's coming out, right? Like you're going to receive that, and all of these projects are going to receive that funding, and I think the ecosystem is just going to go boom, right? Like
and this happens every 3 months. Like there's 4 Pomelo seasons a year, so a lot of the projects aren't going to get all of the money they need, but they just kind of draw out your roadmap, and you come back for the next season and try to get more.
That's a really good point. Every 3 months. Well, we'll wrap this one up, Chris. Thanks for joining us, and the best of luck. I think you guys have about 5 or 6 days left.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Go over and vote for your favorite projects, and have another look at the EnergEOS and the Antifragile Education ecosystem proposals that are over there on Pomelo. We'll see you guys. We're going to take the weekend off, but we'll probably see you guys again on Monday for another episode of Pomelo Pitch Deck.
Thanks, Jimmy.